What happens when one of the world's most beloved brands goes head-to-head with one of the country's most powerful politicians? Well, you just know the fallout is going to be massive. Today, we're going to dive into the incredible political showdown between the Walt Disney Company and the state of Florida.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The spark that lit this whole political bonfire was a single piece of legislation passed in Florida back in March of 2022. And for Disney, which is one of the biggest employers in the entire state, it created a pretty much impossible choice.
So after trying to stay quiet at first, Disney's hand was basically forced. They put out this public statement vowing to fight the new law. And you have to understand, in the world of corporations and state politics, this was huge. It was pretty much a declaration of war, setting the stage for a massive conflict in the legislature, in the courts, and of course in the court of public opinion.
So what was this all about? Well, at the heart of it was this bill. Officially, its name is the Parental Rights and Education Act, and it prohibits classroom instruction on sexual orientation or gender identity from kindergarten through the 3rd grade. But its opponents almost immediately gave it another name, the Don't Say Gay bill. They argued its wording was really vague and that it could end up harming LGBTQ students and their families.
But here's the thing, Disney didn't just jump into this fight. At first, the CEO, Bob Chapek, really wanted to avoid a public battle, especially since the company had actually donated to some of the bill's sponsors. But then, the pressure started building from the inside. We're talking thousands of employees staging walkouts, and Pixar staff even released a letter that claimed Disney executives were censoring overtly gay affection in their movies. This internal rebellion, it really forced the company to pick a side. Now, to understand why the state's response was so powerful, you first have to understand this very special, kind of crazy power that Disney itself had for more than 50 years. See, this wasn't just any company. In a lot of ways, it was its own little government.
Okay, so picture this. It's 1967. Florida really wants Walt Disney World to be built there. So to sweeten the deal, they granted the company something unique, an independent special district called the Reedy Creek Improvement District. This essentially gave Disney the power of a county government over its entire 25,000-acre resort.
And when we say power, we mean real power. Reedy Creek let Disney build its own roads, run its own utilities, and even have its own fire department. This gave them an unbelievable amount of freedom to build and expand without getting tangled up in red tape. And it was this exact special status that became the state's main target in the fight.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting. When the state threatened to dissolve this district, it wasn't just about control. It was about cash, a lot of it. Reedy Creek was holding about $1 billion in bond debt. And the huge question was, if the district just vanished, who would be on the hook for that billion-dollar bill? A lot of people were worried it would be the local taxpayers.
You know, as wild as this fight was, it's actually not the first time Disney has been in a major public showdown. To really get what's going on with the company, you got to rewind the clock a bit and look at its history, because it's full of these intense internal fights that totally reshaped who they are.
So, was this the first time? Oh, not even close. For the proof, we have to go all the way back to 1941. This was a battle that pitted Walt Disney himself against the very artists who were bringing his cartoons to life. And believe me, it got deeply personal.
I mean, just look at what the animators were fighting for back then. We're talking huge pay gaps, not getting any credit on screen for their work, a super rigid hierarchy. The artists just felt completely undervalued. The strike that happened was really bitter, but it led to them getting union recognition. And it's such a fascinating parallel, right? Both in 1941 and in 2022, it was a rebellion from Disney's own creative people that forced the company to publicly face its own values.
All right, let's fast forward to the 21st century. The challenges for a media giant like Disney well, they've gotten way more complex. The battles aren't just fought on picket lines or in state capitals anymore. Now they're fought in the digital world too.
And that brings us to a whole new kind of battlefront for Disney: digital privacy. For example, the company got into some hot water with the Federal Trade Commission, which alleged that Disney's YouTube channels were illegally collecting personal data from kids without their parents' permission. It just goes to show how much the company's responsibilities have grown in this modern age. So, as you can see, whether it's old-school labor rights or modern-day data privacy, Disney's role in public life is constantly being tested. So with all that history in mind, let's get back to Florida and see how this most recent and most high-profile of these battles finally wrapped up.
Wow, I mean, just look at how fast this all happened. It was this rapid-fire back and forth. In April of 2022, the governor signs the bill to dissolve the district. By February of the next year, the state officially takes control. Then Disney fires back with a lawsuit, which then gets dismissed. And then finally in March 2024, they reach a settlement. It was a complete legal and political whirlwind for 2 straight years.
So how did it end? Well, it wasn't some dramatic knockout punch for either side. It was more like a ceasefire. Basically, Disney agreed to pause its federal lawsuit. The states swapped out a couple of the board members for people a little more friendly to Disney, and both sides agreed to sit down and negotiate a new development plan. The public war of words was over, and the fight moved from the press conferences back into the boardroom.
But you know, this whole story is so much bigger than just one theme park and one governor. The Disney-Florida feud really forces all of us to think about a huge question for our time. What is the proper role for these massive corporations in society's biggest debates? Should they just stay silent and focus on making money, or should they use their incredible influence to take a stand? As this whole saga proves, there are no easy answers.